Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Wrath, and we're back in Hellion today to do an advanced navigation and warp guide. Now, my previous video covered the basics of maneuvering and plotting a course with your FTL drive in order to reach some destination that you want to explore. Either, scanning down the site of an interesting signature, or trying to raid somebody else's base that's in close proximity to you, whatever it might be. However, sometimes you want to go a really long distance. But a lot of people run into a problem when they try to do this, which is that they either at the beginning of their warp or at the end of their warp end up dead. And the reason for that is part of the game mechanics is that if your warp takes you through a solid object, such as a moon, an asteroid, or a planet, you're dead. Reasonable. However, the nav system doesn't warn you, or doesn't even, doesn't hold your hand in any way about the dangers that you are about to experience. So you end up in this situation where you're like, well, everything looked good because it didn't tell you that your path was obstructed, or that your future path might be obstructed by a moving moon. All right, because you may look at the path, you may be able to actually see the path and say, oh, it looks like I'll be able to make it, no problem. But what you forget is that the moons are all moving in their orbits, and if your flight path passes through one of those orbits, if that moon happens to be in the same place at the same time as you're dead. So I've put together a few basic processes that will help you to avoid this happening to you and the ever giant frustration of having to redo everything. So we're going to remove this and we're going to try again. So what I've done is I've set an orbit, a vertical orbit around my parent planet. I'm on the moon over there, which is Enigma. And I want to warp away from Hirith here because I just don't like this neighborhood. So I've decided I'm going to move to this location here and do an orbit. I'm going to move to one of the other major planets and one of its moons. So I've decided in order to do that, I've made this transition warp that will allow me to get myself out of harm's way before I start warping. So now wow, that's an 8-minute warp. I think we can pare that down just a little bit here. Alright, so that's about a 6.5-minute warp. We're locked in, we're ready to go. I've just made sure that my ship is all set. We got plenty of RCS and everything, so now we're just turning to find our navigational mark and we're going to go. Now the reason for these this position, because when you're moving between two different planets or even two different moons, they're far enough apart where you can't clearly see the path between the two, you want... Oh shoot, I just scrubbed that. Hold on, hit the wrong button. Come on. Okay, remove that. Click. Warp. 6 minutes here. 6.5 minutes. Okay. Warp fuel. Initialize. Control, and we're ready. So, because I've set this warp where I've got a very wide orbit around the planet that will take me a long time to go around, and I've set myself either below or above the plane of the planet, I know that I should be clear of virtually any objects that I might run into. Any moons, asteroids, all of those will be out of my flight path. But we're going to double down on that when we're ready to jump to the other planet, which is that when we do the jump to the other planet, we're likewise going to target a similar orbit as the one that we've just created that we're waiting to warp to. So that way we're creating two waypoints that are free and clear away from the orbits of any moons or any other objects around these planets, so that we have a straight, unobstructed line between the two. So as this one finishes up, you'll see what I mean as I walk through it. Now I've picked just like the next planet over, which I think is like the fourth planet, and I'm just doing it because I've got some spare warp cells, so I'm making this video to show it off to you as the proper way for you to warp between planets if you're going to do it. It's not a one-shot deal. You can't just straight warp from one planet to another unless you're really freaking lucky. So our warp is activated, and we're now going to go in, and that's going to be about a 5-minute warp, because you always the time that you set on the bottom number is minus the time on the top, because it does include the 2, which I don't really understand why they do that, but you know, whatever. It is what it is. Now that we've set this orbit, we can actually, while we're waiting, we can go ahead and start looking at our nav and start plotting our next navigation. So now you can see, we can see that we're moving. This is our orbit here, and this is our line of travel that we're going along. So we'll be able to see that, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to zoom to parent, and that should switch us to the sun. So now we're looking at the sun. We know that we're moving orbits around over here, so we're just going to pick this one over here, and we're going to pick a custom orbit on that. And obviously I've got plenty of time to plan this out because I've got about a 6-minute warp, or 5-minute warp. So I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, we've actually ended up on one of the moons. No, this is Arroyo. So this is, if I remember correctly, this thing's got, yeah, it's got one planet with a moon, and then it's got another moon with another moon. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and spread this orbit out so that we've got a nice circularized orbit that's free and clear of anything, and we're going to again turn this on its side, and we're going to target another area down right around here on the bottom. So we're going to wait. We've got that now set up so we can come back to that, because those nav points will stay there as long as you don't delete them. So you can create custom waypoints within the navigation system that will allow you to make this trip a lot less painfully. Because you can say, okay, I've already set up this orbit, that's my transition orbit for this planet, and a transition orbit for the other planet that I came from, and you can leave those there. And the system, from my testing, the system seems to remember that information for you in your nav system. So it says, oh yeah, you created this orbit, so I remember that you created it. Because you can create multiple orbits, and they'll all be there indefinitely until you remove them. Although I don't think it saves when you log. So we'll cover that. I mean, that's a minor thing. No worries. So as we finish up our warp here in another 2 minutes, we're going to immediately go back into our nav system. Since we've already built the orbit that we want, we can quickly target that one and shoot directly across from underneath one planet to underneath the other, and not have to worry about intersecting with any moons along the way, because we're beneath their orbits. We're outside of their orbital paths, so our trip will be a straight shot. So we're just waiting, and I'm killing a little bit of time here, waiting for the warp to end. Now, when you make these big jumps, though, you have to remember, if you're making a big jump between the planets, those can be my longest warp when I was testing this, going between really far away planets from each other, like the I think it was like the second or third planet all the way out to the sixth planet, was about a 3-hour warp. So plan accordingly, because you're going to spend it when you decide to move from one planet to another. You are going to spend a lot of time looking at this, or just walking around your ship trying to figure out something to do with your time. So I'm actually looking forward to if they put in the actual basketball or whatever, the weird things that they were talking about in the game that people were like, it's a space simulator, you don't need basketball. Well, honestly, I'm probably going to say that I need something to do on these long warps. So, we're about 30 seconds out, so we're going to get ready. So, just killing the last few seconds here of idle time while we're waiting to do our warp. All right, and we've come out of warp, and we're now in that dropped orbit. So you can see we're in the we're still targeted on the other one, but we're going to go ahead and move this marker down towards the bottom. We're going to say, all right, we're going to warp into that orbit, which doesn't cross any other orbits. We're going to say warp to this one, and as you can see, we're watching the line, and it goes pretty far south, but we're not going to run into anything. So now we're going to say, all right, since we're jumping from one planet to another, we're going to do warp 3. And we're going to bring up our time because it's too low. Okay. So bring it down as much as we can. Okay, too low, and bingo. So now we're going to put in our fuel, and as you can see, that's going to drive the higher warp you use, the less time it'll take, but the longer the warp will be. So we're going to go ahead and do warp 2 and see where that lands us here. Okay, that'll be about a 45-minute warp, and I'm okay with that because I don't want to waste an entire fuel, 2 entire fuel cells of warp fuel just for a one-shot deal. Actually, I'm going to pair this back down to warp 1 because since this is a tutorial video, I don't want to waste all of that time. So instead, it's going to be about an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and lock that in, and now we're going to again maneuver to our marker. So now we are locked in, good to go. And with this quick launch, we're done. Once we get into that other orbit on the other side, which I'm not going to make you guys sit through an hour-long warp, once you get to the other side, you can then pick an orbit around whatever object you're going to make your home around and set up there. All right, so you don't have to worry about these long trips causing your death. So I will add a little addendum on the back of this just so that you can see me at the end of the warp in my new location at the bottom of the other planet. But that's going to be about the end of it. So remember to use this system if you're planning on moving your base or planning on just taking a trip to another planet. One, it's going to be very expensive on fuel. There's really no way around that. But it will allow you to change neighborhoods to get away from it all, so to speak, and perhaps set up your base in a place that nobody will find you if that's your intent. But this will give you a very good opportunity to build your bases and really pick the location that you want rather than the location that you're spawned with. And this will allow you to do it without dying. So until next time, I'm Wrath. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, leave some comments if you have any. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed so you can see when more of these videos come out. And I will try to continue to update these with additional relevant information on various different things like piracy protocols, where both for defender and attacker, good base designs, and how to find the raw resources and stuff that you need in order to proceed. Plus, I'll be updating some of the guides as the game evolves with the later versions of the alpha and then beta and release. So until next time, I'm Wrath. I hope you've enjoyed, and I will catch you later.